Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar hosted by immigrationquestion.com. We are thrilled to have you join us for an in-depth discussion on a topic that affects many families in the United States today, that is spousal visas. I'm your host Maliha and I will be your moderator to lead today's topic on everything you need to know about spousal visas. So let's get started. Joining us today is attorney Mr. H.K. Gandhi. He is an experienced immigration attorney and principal founder of the law office H.K. Gandhi. He's an American citizen, a Canadian citizen, and an OCI holder. Prior to opening the law office of H.K. Gandhi, he worked on complex transactional immigration matters, ranging from family based immigration to VAWA based immigration in Washington state. You are very welcome to the session today, Mr. Harry.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us today. So let's dive right in. To start, can you explain what a spousal visa is and what different types are available?
Spousal visas are given to the spouses of U.S. citizens and green card holders. So there's generally one petition that is linked to either or the green card holder or the citizen. You can do this while you're in the country, which is adjustment of status, or while the spouse is abroad, which is consular processing. Different time frames, but ultimately it's the same result. The spouse gets to come here and obtain their green card.
Interesting. Thank you so much for the insight. Moving on to our next question. What are the basic eligibility requirements for a spousal visa that covers the two major types of spousal visa?
The requirements are essentially the same. The procedure is a little bit different, but mainly, obviously, it has to be a legitimate marriage. You have to legally get married. On top of that, you need proof of the relationship. So, generally, if someone is abroad, it's a little bit harder to prove, but things like visitations, text messages, um, hotel receipts, plane tickets, any of that, and obviously the big ceremony if you have one. Pictures from that are usually required. Beyond that, you can get letters and things like that from individuals who know you, know of the relationship. Um, Generally, you have to prove the marriage. So,
Correct. Basically, the proofs of.
proofs of the and it could be really anything. We've submitted all kinds of stuff that generally doesn't pop into your mind. Gym memberships with both people
Oh,
on them. Anything really.
interesting. That's quite interesting. So now, having you arrived in the United States on an F1 student visa yourself and
Right.
going through the green card process with your beautiful American citizen wife, I can bet you understand how stressful it is generally for immigrants going through the green card
Yeah.
journey.
Yeah.
So, what are some common challenges that you faced
Oof.
throughout the
Common
application?
challenges are generally inherently within a marriage. So I think people, when they go for the marriage based green card, like myself, think, well, this is easier than the employment based, especially if you're from India when you have long wait times. But obviously, they're both difficult. So the inherent risks in a marriage always apply, but they're doubled in a green card. So if something's not going well, then that's going to affect the green card. Processing times generally are the worst experience most people have. So I can tell you, I got my green card within 6 months. That's very lucky. I have maybe one or two clients, 2 months, 1 month, but most people, 8 to 10 months if they're in the country. And then if they're in India or anywhere abroad, it's significantly longer. I mean, we've had clients up to 15, 20 months. And so when people are waiting for something, that generally adds pressure to the marriage and it makes it harder to go through the entire process. On top of that, after you get your green card, if you've only been married for 2 years at that time, you're only going to get a temporary green card. That then has to be renewed at the end of another 2 years. So the same risks I just said inherently apply to a marriage will then continue on. I'm a citizen, but it definitely adds more pressure to the marriage, which then is linked to the green card. Beyond that, the only other thing that we sometimes see that's difficult that I didn't personally experience is the financial sponsorship. Like myself, if you came here as a student, your wife was a student at that time, then she's not going to be working. You're not going to be working. You're going to need somebody to be a joint sponsor. That's basically someone co-signing for your spouse for you, saying that this person isn't going to be a burden to the country. That is not an easy task if you don't have a close family or your family doesn't make that much money. That is a big hurdle that we often face even before just when the green card is about to be filed.
Well, that sounds complicated.
Right.
Speaking of this, can you walk us through the key documents required for a spousal visa application?
Sure. So obviously you need the marriage certificate. You need proof of the relationship. So anything that I just said, pictures, letters, tickets, receipts, gifts. Um, what I will say is USCIS can tell quite well how legitimate something is by looking at how organic pictures look. So not selfies, but family outings and things like that. Beyond that, tax documents from the petitioner, so the U.S. citizen spouse, are required as well. Um, Beyond that, I think it's the birth certificate, and that's really it. I think the bulk of the evidence comes from the proof of the relationship.
All right, that's
And
that's
so, and so,
enlightening.
what I'll add to that is we sometimes here are some key documents that we very much like to see. Uh, for
Right.
both people being on the health insurance. If you are, if you have a life insurance policy and the other person's on there, that generally adds to the legitimacy of the marriage. No one, you're not just going to put someone on a policy. Bank accounts, stocks, bonds, and houses where they're in both names very well because obviously if you're getting married and it's legitimate, you generally put someone on there. If it's not legitimate, you're not going to take that risk to add someone onto your bank account.
That's interesting for a lot. That's a lot of things to go through,
Right,
honestly.
right.
Right. So, moving on to our very next question. From the legal experience that you've had, what is that a marriage visa case that you took, or maybe an immigration matter at all, which probably had the most roadblock, and how were you able to scale it through that challenge?
Hmm. The biggest, most recent roadblock we had was a client from Pakistan who was in the UK who had married an older woman here in the US. She's an American. So the first thing was the age. The other issue is that this individual decided to come here after we had filed the petition on a single intent visa, a visa that's not allowed to be then transferred to a green card straightforward. Um, but we filed it anyways. They got to the interview, everything went well, and then they asked him, you know, did you plan on basically entering and filing the green card? He had written, he said no, but then on the visitor visa application, and this is quite common, so this is something you should take note of, is that they put they were single, or they didn't they put that they didn't know anyone here, right? But at the interview, they said
Right.
he knew his spouse before he entered, and obviously we had filed a petition, so it's clearly obvious to anyone that he knew her. So at
Right.
that point, they approved the petition, but they sent a request for evidence, or sorry, an intent to deny on the green card application for misrepresentation. So we then filed a waiver, and those generally take 34 months, but we were able to file it directly with the same officer, and within about I'd say 60 days, 90 days, they were able to get the approval. I didn't personally, I didn't think the waiver was strong enough, but it still
Mhm.
went through, and so that's all that matters at that point.
Which makes you the best in this particular immigration, field. So
Right.
let Yeah, I mean, yes, of course. So we also have one of our attendees who would like
Sure.
to ask questions. So let's open the floor for them. We have one from Mr. Toin Mohammed. How long does the entire spousal visa application process last?
It's the most common question I get. This is what I tell clients because it's not a straightforward answer. What I'll tell you right off the bat, a lawyer does not make the case go faster. The only difference is I do it right the first time, it might move a little bit smoother. The overall time frame I've seen anywhere between 9, 10 months, and then up to 24, 30 months. And then there are certain countries, Pakistan's one of them, where the embassy just backlogged. So we've had cases out there for 3, 4 years still pending. So I can't really answer straightforward, but it's usually a time clients to expect a longer time. If it comes quicker than that, you're going to be happy. But if you're expecting it to be done in 6, 7 months, it may be too quick. And I know people like, I have a cousin or a brother or someone who got it faster, but we don't know the circumstances there, and we don't know how fast they were moving cases at that time, and we don't know which officer they got. So you cannot compare your case to someone else's. That's the key here as far as time frame.
Right. I mean, absolutely. I totally agree on that. So, just give me a minute just to let the audience know if you're just joining us. This is immigrationquestion.com live webinar session. Immigrationquestion.com is a revolutionary platform that connects immigrants and users with qualified immigration attorneys. You can ask your questions for free and you'll be connected to a verified attorney registered on the platform. For immigration attorneys, this is your opportunity to scale your practice to the next level. Register as an attorney and get up to 10 free client leads upon sign up. So, moving on, Mr. Harry, what is the 90-day rule about when it comes to K1 visa?
Hmm. 90 days with the K1, you have to get married within 90 days of entry to file the adjustment without having to refile the I-130. If you get married after that, you can still get your green card, but you then have to file an I-130 marriage petition with the adjustment application.
Right, absolutely. So, we have another question coming from the audience. What if my spouse has a criminal record and immigration violations?
Depends on where. Are you referring to within the United States? If they are, then what I would say is it depends on what the criminal record is and what the immigration violations are and whether they've exited the country, returned. Um, but generally, if you have a DUI, let's say, and you've overstayed, we've got many clients with DUIs who have overstayed. Those two things generally won't affect your immigration unless you've got like 10, 15 DUIs, within the span of a year or two. That's a character issue for which they will deny you. But a single one-off offense, parking, traffic, even like simple assault, you can possibly explain it away. As far as the violation, it just really depends. Overstays are generally not an issue. Illegal entry is an issue, but can be overcome in many ways, either through a waiver and then exiting the country, or if the spouse is a military member, you're able to basically make the illegal entry legal by doing an additional interview and doing an additional application. But that's only for active duty military.
Right, that's very enlightening. I think we had the same question from Miss Moniz, which has been addressed already. Moving on to our very next question from the audience itself, and it's coming from the Godfather production. Given the current immigration climate and with the elections coming, do you foresee any changes to the spousal visa process in the near future?
Hmm. What I'll say is they generally don't change the requirements beyond the public charge stuff. So whether your spouse has debt, elections generally speed up the naturalization process, but they don't, in my experience, expect or they don't affect the spousal process. I got my green card under Trump, and when Trump was in office, everyone was concerned. I can tell you personally, myself and almost everyone got their green card quicker now than they did after. So I don't particularly think elections affect the process itself. The procedures change and how fast they're processing things are the only thing that I've seen actually change.
That's right. I totally agree on it. So, I think we have an online attendee, right? So let me have her here. Just one moment. Yes, we also have an online attendee ready to join live and would like to ask a few questions to you.
Sure.
Hello, Miss
Hello.
Onyeka. Proceed to ask your
Hi.
question.
Hi,
Hi.
how are you doing?
Hello. My name is Nina. I am an African living in to ask what happens if my marriage ends. I'm very well, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, for me, it's kind of cutting out. I didn't hear the question.
I wanted to ask what happens if my marriage ends after I file for a spousal visa. Does that affect my application?
If it's still pending, yes, unless you're filing a VAWA application for abuse. Generally, if someone's filed for you and then you get a divorce before it's approved, well, then they wouldn't look at the time of the application you're not married, so they would deny it if it ends before the approval. If it ends after, it's a little bit different.
Um, Miss Onyeka, are you there? I think there's some kind of network issue. All right, she left. Okay. Thank you so much for joining, Miss Onyeka. And I think that is done. I think we don't have any more questions from the audience. So, moving on to our next question. What are some things that you could expect in the spousal visa interview?
Ooh, depends on your circumstances. So I can give you, for example, my interview and then some other clients. Um, the number one thing they want to know are little details. If you say you're living together, you're probably going to know who wakes up first. You're going to know your in laws' names. You're going to know, oh, what's her favorite movie? Little details that generally they're going to catch you off guard with. You don't actually have to know everything. You just have to give a genuine answer, and that's kind of what they're looking at. Other things they look at are body language, and I always tell clients if you enter the building, do not sit with a chair in between you. That does not look like a married couple. Generally, married couples sit closer together. They look to see if one person is uncomfortable or not. Now, of course, there's anxious people who could always, I was nervous too, so I was probably sweating. Um, they'll go through your entire application with you, ask you one to confirm if it's correct, and two to see if there's any discrepancies in what you say versus what's written on there. If it's going really bad, there's two things that could happen. They could separate you and then ask you questions, or they could tell you to come back, separate you, and ask you questions. One of the worst things I've seen with one of my clients, and I always tell people this is cops, police officers do not have to actually tell you the truth. They will take the other person into the room and say, we are going to file a marriage fraud case against you. We know this is fake. We saw this, this, and that. If you don't sign here, this is going to end bad for you. I had a client who was at work and they showed up and she was obviously scared. They're legitimate. They're still married, but got a signed statement from the officer saying they weren't. Now, this could happen at an interview or it could happen after, but if it happens at the interview, we generally now inform everyone that they cannot just charge you. If they were going to, they would have done it already. But that's the worst of it. Otherwise, little details. Make sure you know everyone's name. Make sure you know events. Make sure you know how you met. Make sure you know your marriage date, birth dates. Um, and that's really the bulk of it. It's not if it's a genuine marriage and you've been living together long enough, you for sure will be able to answer the questions, as I tell everyone.
Right. So, those are the little details which need to be taken care of.
Right. But I think the most thing is it doesn't matter if you're correct or not. It's organic. husbands and wives and partners tend to do certain little things. If I don't know the date, my wife usually corrects me, or if she doesn't know, like little back and forths, they look at that.
All right. All right. That's really insightful. We have a couple of questions from the audience again. I am already living in the United States on another visa. Can I apply for spousal visa without leaving the country?
Generally, yes. Depends on what the other visa is. If it's a B2, there are some strings attached to it, but even then, it's a yes. Most visas, or almost all visas, you can file for adjustment of status here, unless your spouse is a green card holder, because right now the dates are not current.
All right. Thank you so much for that valuable insight. Moving on to our next question from Mr. Habib. How does the process differ if one's spouse is already a US citizen?
It's faster in the sense that if the spouse is a citizen, then there's no waiting period as far as priority dates. Their visa or the green card is available immediately. If they're a green card holder, you kind of have to abide by the chart online. Sometimes it's current, sometimes it's not. The other difference is if a green card holder files for you and then they become a citizen, you can now upgrade your case to the spouse of a citizen. And if you're in line for a visa, it'll just become immediately available. So it tends to be faster overall as far as waiting time, but the actual process itself, if all the dates were current, there shouldn't be any speed difference because it's still going through the same infrastructure to get out to the other end.
Right, right. I have a question myself. I think I've had a couple of conversation with a couple of clients, and is a green card holder, allowed to sponsor or is eligible to sponsor his or her spouse? I believe not.
They, for their spouse,
Right. For
they
their
can.
spouse or not the spouse exactly, for fiance. I'm sure they can do it for their
No, no, for the fiance, it's only citizens
right.
that can
Right.
file it, and even if it's and citizens without a hefty criminal record too.
All right. All right. Thank you so much for answering my question. Let's move on to the audience questions again. It's from Mr. Aziz. What documents are necessary to prove the authenticity of spousal relationship for visa purposes?
I'm glad you asked this because there's something on my mind. When they look at fraud, I think everyone needs to understand this. They don't care if the citizen believes they're in love. Obviously, most of the times they're going to see, okay, the citizen is. They look at it from the other person's perspective, meaning, is the immigrant basically convincing this man or woman that it's a legit that they're actually in love to get the green card. So that being said, they tend to look at the efforts of the beneficiary as well, because oftentimes the petitioner will fly there, they'll do all these things, but even then, the beneficiary, there'll be pictures alone, there'll be pictures where there's selfies only. That to them does not look authentic. If you're out, if someone's coming to visit, you're going to take them out with your family versus if you have pictures at outings. And on top of that, if the beneficiary makes the effort to come here, that's a little bit harder. Obviously, if you're from certain countries, traveling, just getting a visa to America is difficult. But if, let's say, you're from the UK, pretty easy to come here on an ESTA for 90 days to see your spouse that you say you love and are planning on marrying. So they really do look at the efforts of the beneficiary towards the relationship. It cannot just be one sided from the petitioner, and we see that quite often. That doesn't mean it won't get approved, but it'll make it a little bit harder.
Right. We have more questions coming. Lastly, can spouses? Okay. We have a question, a live question. Which family members can sponsor relatives for U.S. immigrant visas that will grant them permanent entry?
Family members, as in family relationships, so you can sponsor your
Like maybe
grandparent or your parents, you can sponsor your siblings, or you can sponsor your children. The speed of which each application is processed is different, and it depends whether you're a citizen or not. But if you sponsor your parents, it's immediate if you're a US citizen. If you sponsor your siblings, there's generally a 10, 15-year wait. And then if you sponsor your kids, if they're under 21, it's immediate. If they're over 21, then there's going to be a wait. Usually about 10 years these days.
That's a lot of time. Moving on to our next question. What is the process for someone living outside the United States to join their newly married citizen spouse living in the United States? Which application is needed?
Right, to start the process, you need to file the I-130 along with the I-130A. You can do that online, and then once the application is approved, they will send the case from the NVC to the embassy. You'll have to upload all of the proof of relationship documents. Well, actually, no, that's at the petition. You'll have to upload biographical documents and the financial support. So the other form you're going to need is the I-864.
All right, those are a lot of forms. You'll need an attorney to do that, honestly. Moving on to our next question from Mr. Tosin. Can my spouse work or study in the United States while waiting for the US spousal visa?
Yeah, it depends. If they're already on F1, they can continue the F1 visa and just study as they were until the green card's approved. If they just have a pending 485 application, that will depend on the school. Some schools will take the pending 485 and the EAD card if you apply for it as proof of something to let you enroll. Other schools will say that that doesn't count and you need the green card. So this is one of those things where if the school accepts it, and I know on the West Coast in California and possibly in New York, you can get acceptance in most places with a 485 receipt. But yeah, it's going to depend on the school and whether they're willing to accept it.
Right, right. That's quite complicated as well. Mr. Aziz is thanking you for answering his question.
No problem.
All right, I think before we could wrap up, my last question to you is, now being an immigration attorney with ample experience over the years, what are some tips for ensuring a smooth and successful spousal visa application that you'd like to share?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely don't talk to family and friends about it. Get off Google, get off Reddit. It doesn't apply to you. That's just even before you file anything. Second thing is don't expect a timeline. Definitely don't expect 3, 4, 5, 6 months because that's not realistic. If you're gonna do it, just put the biggest number in your head, and then anything before that is great. Beyond that, the documentation does matter. So don't make excuses for, oh, I can't get this. Like, make the effort to get it. Otherwise, the entire process will go slower, specifically with certain types of birth certificates or adding names to bank accounts and health insurance and things like that. It might be difficult. It might require extra paperwork or extra legwork, but I would definitely get it done so that you don't have to deal with additional questions later on.
Right, that's right. That's the right thing to do. Also, you can reach out to Mr. H.K. Gandhi. He has his own law firm if you'd like to give the contact details to your audience.
Sure. So you can contact, or you can go on our website at www.gandhiimmigration.com. I'm also available for live consultations on lawfully, and generally, if you book a consultation or call, you'll be able to reach us. I won't give out my email as I get too many emails now, so I try to keep it private. I think it's online. If you really want my email, you can find it, but I won't say it here. Otherwise, I'm going to get a lot of emails.
Right, absolutely. So, for the audience, kindly visit immigrationquestion.com and drop your questions because we are running out of time. I'm sorry if we were not able to answer all your questions. I think that is all we have for you today, viewers. A huge thank you to a special guest who honored our invitation. Thank you so much, Mr. Harry, for a pleasing and knowledgeable session. We cannot wait to have you another time.
No problem. It's great to be here, and I'm looking forward to the next time.
Likewise, Mr. Harry. This is immigrationquestion.com, a platform built to answer all your immigration queries. And for attorneys, we help you upscale and grow your business effortlessly. Don't forget to explore all that Immigration Question has to offer. Visit our website www.immigrationquestion.com to sign up today and start getting your immigration questions answered. If you are an immigration attorney looking to grow your practice with zero cost obligation, register now on immigrationquestion.com and have up to 10 free client leads sent your way. Thank you so much for joining us today. See you all next week. Thank you so much, Mr. Harry.
Thank you.